An airplane or aeroplaneA is a powered fixed-wing aircraft that is propelled forward by thrust from a jet engine or propeller. Airplanes come in a variety of sizes, shapes, and wing configurations. The broad spectrum of uses for airplanes includes recreation, transportation of goods and people, military, and research. Commercial aviation is a massive industry involving the flying of tens of thousands of passengers daily on airliners. Most airplanes are flown by a pilot on board the aircraft, but some are designed to be remotely computer-controlled. The Wright brothers invented and flew the first airplane in 1903, recognized as the first sustained and controlled heavier-than-air powered flight. They built on the work of several 19th-century aviation pioneers, including George Cayley, Otto Lilienthal and Octave Chanute. World War I accelerated the advance of airplane technology, and by World War II airplanes participated in all major battles. The first jet aircraft was the German Heinkel He-178 in 1939. The first jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet, was introduced in 1952. The Boeing 707, the first widely successful commercial jet, was in service for more than 50 years, from 1958 to at least 2013. Etymology and usage. First attested in English in the late 19th century, the word airplane, like aeroplane, derives from the French aeroplane, which comes from the Greek aero, air, and either Latin planus, level, or Greek pi lambda alpha nu omicron sigma, wandering. Aeroplane originally referred just to the wing, as it is a plane moving through the air. In an example of synecdoche, the word for the wing came to refer to the entire aircraft. In the United States and Canada, the term airplane is used for powered fixed-wing aircraft. In the United Kingdom and most of the Commonwealth, the term aeroplane is usually applied to these aircraft. History. Antecedents. Many stories from antiquity involve flight, such as the Greek legend of Icarus and Daedalus, and the Vimana in ancient Indian epics. Around 400 BC in Greece, Archithas was reputed to have designed and built the first artificial, self-propelled flying device, a bird-shaped model propelled by a jet of what was probably steam, said to have flown some 200 meters. This machine may have been suspended for its flight. Some of the earliest recorded attempts with gliders were those by the 9th century poet Abbas ibn Firnas and the 11th century monk Elmer of Malmesbury. Both experiments injured the pilots. Leonardo da Vinci researched the wing design of birds and designed a man-powered aircraft in his Codex on the Flight of Birds. In 1799, George Cayley set forth the concept of the modern airplane as a fixed-wing flying machine with separate systems for lift, propulsion, and control. Cayley was building and flying models of fixed-wing aircraft as early as 1803, and he built a successful passenger-carrying glider in 1853. In 1856, Frenchman Jean-Marie Lebris made the first powered flight by having his glider, l'Albatros Artificiel, pulled by a horse on a beach. Then Alexander F. Modjeski also made some innovative designs. In 1883, the American John J. Montgomery made a controlled flight in a glider. Other aviators who made similar flights at the time were Otto Lilienthal, Percy Pilcher, and Octave Chanute. Sahar and Maxim built a craft that weighed 3.5 tons, with a 110-foot wingspan that was powered by two 360-horsepower steam engines driving two propellers. In 1894, his machine was tested with overhead rails to prevent it from rising. The test showed that it had enough lift to take off. The craft was uncontrollable, which Maxim, it is presumed, realized, because he subsequently abandoned work on it. In the 1890s, Lawrence Hargrave conducted research on wing structures and developed a box kite that lifted the weight of a man. His box kite designs were widely adopted. Although he also developed a type of rotary aircraft engine, he did not create and fly a powered fixed-wing aircraft. Between 1867 and 1896, the German pioneer of human aviation Otto Lilienthal developed heavier-than-air flight. He was the first person to make well-documented, repeated, successful gliding flights. Early powered flights. The Wright brothers' flights in 1903 are recognized by the Fédération Internationale, the standard-setting and record-keeping body for aeronautics, as the first sustained and controlled heavier-than-air powered flight. By 1905, the Wright Flyer 3 was capable of fully controllable, stable flight for substantial periods. The Wright brothers credited Otto Lilienthal as a major inspiration for the decision to pursue manned flight. In 1906, Alberto Santos Dumont made what was claimed to be the first airplane flight unassisted by catapult and set the first world record recognized by the Aero Club de France by flying 220 meters in less than 22 seconds. This flight was also certified by the FI, an early aircraft design that brought together the modern monoplane tractor configuration was the Blériot 8 design of 1908. It had movable tail, surfaces controlling both yaw and pitch, a form of roll control supplied either by wing warping or by ailerons and controlled by its pilot with a joystick and rudder bar. It was an important predecessor of his later Blériot Channel crossing aircraft of the summer of 1909. In Romania, the aircraft, Avlic Unia 1, was finished in 1909, and was test-flown on June 17, 1910. For the first flight the airplane had no need of changes. The plane was made from a single aluminum spar 10 meters long which supported the entire aircraft, making it very easy to fly. 10 planes were made for the Romanian Air Force, being the second ever military air force in the world. World War I served as a test bed for the use of the airplane as a weapon. Airplanes demonstrated the potential as mobile observation platforms, then proved themselves to be machines of war capable of causing casualties to the enemy. The earliest known aerial victory with a synchronized machine gun-armed fighter aircraft occurred in 1915, by German Luftstreitkraft Lieutenant Kurt Wentgens. Fighter aces appeared. The greatest was Manfred von Richthofen. Following World War I, aircraft technology continued to develop. Alcock and Brown crossed the Atlantic non-stop for the first time in 1919. The first international commercial flights took place between the United States and Canada in 1919. Airplanes had a presence in all the major battles of World War II. They were an essential component of the military strategies of the period, such as the German Blitzkrieg, the Battle of Britain, and the American and Japanese aircraft carrier campaigns of the Pacific War. Development of jet aircraft. The first operational jet aircraft was the German Heinkel He 178, which was tested in 1939. In 1943, the Messerschmitt Me 262, the first operational jet fighter aircraft, went into service in the German Luftwaffe. In October 1947, the Bell X-1 was the first aircraft to exceed the speed of sound. The first jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet, was introduced in 1952. The Boeing 707, the first widely successful commercial jet, was in commercial service for more than 50 years, from 1958 to 2010. The Boeing 747 was the world's biggest passenger aircraft from 1970 until it was surpassed by the Airbus A380 in 2005. Propulsion. Propeller engines. Smaller and older propeller planes make use of reciprocating engines to turn a propeller to create thrust. The amount of thrust a propeller creates is determined by its disk area, the area in which the blades rotate. If the area is too small, efficiency is poor, and if the area is large, the propeller must rotate at a very low speed to avoid going supersonic and creating a lot of noise, and not much thrust. Because of this limitation, propellers are favored for planes which travel at below Mach 5, while jets are a better choice above that speed. Propeller engines may be quieter than jet engines and may cost less to purchase and maintain, and so remain common on light general aviation aircraft, such as the Cessna 172. Larger modern propeller planes such as the Dash 8 use a jet engine to turn the propeller, primarily because an equivalent piston engine in power output would be much larger and more complex. Jet engines. Jet aircraft are propelled by jet engines, which are used because the aerodynamic limitations of propellers do not apply to jet propulsion. These engines are much more powerful than a reciprocating engine for a given size or weight, and comparatively quiet and work well at higher altitude. Most modern jet planes use turbofan jet engines which balance the advantages of a propeller while retaining the exhaust speed and power of a jet. This is essentially a ducted propeller attached to a jet engine, much like a turboprop, but with a smaller diameter. When installed on an airliner, it is efficient so long as it remains below the speed of sound. Jet fighters and other supersonic aircraft that do not spend a great deal of time supersonic also often use turbofans, but to function, air intake ducting is needed to slow the air down so that when it arrives at the front of the turbofan, it is subsonic. When passing through the engine, it is then re-accelerated back to supersonic speeds. To further boost the power output, fuel is dumped into the exhaust stream, where it ignites. This is called an afterburner and has been used on both pure jet aircraft and turbojet aircraft, although it is only normally used on combat aircraft, due to the amount of fuel consumed, and even then may only be used for short periods of time. Supersonic airliners are no longer in use, largely because flight at supersonic speed creates a sonic boom which is prohibited in most heavily populated areas, and because of the much higher consumption of fuel supersonic flight requires. Jet aircraft possess high cruising speeds and high speeds for takeoff and landing. Due to the speed needed for takeoff and landing, jet aircraft use flaps and leading-edge devices to control the lift and speed. Many jet aircraft also use thrust reversers to slow down the aircraft upon landing. Electric engines. An electric aircraft runs on electric motors rather than internal combustion engines, with electricity coming from fuel cells, solar cells, ultracapacitors, power beaming, or batteries. Currently flying electric aircraft are mostly experimental prototypes, including manned and unmanned aerial vehicles, but there are some production models on the market already. Rocket engines. In World War II, the Germans deployed the Me-163 Comet rocket-powered aircraft. The first plane to break the sound barrier in level flight was a rocket plane, the Bell X-1. The later North American X-15 broke many speed and altitude records and laid much of the groundwork for later aircraft and spacecraft design. Rocket aircraft are not in common usage today, although rocket-assisted takeoffs are used for some military aircraft. Recent rocket aircraft include the Spaceship One and the XCOREZ rocket. Ramjet and scramjet engines. A ramjet is a form of jet engine that contains no major moving parts and can be particularly useful in applications requiring a small and simple engine for high-speed use, such as with missiles. Ramjets require forward motion before they can generate thrust and so are often used in conjunction with other forms of propulsion, or with an external means of achieving sufficient speed. The Lockheed D-21 was a Mach 3 Plus ramjet-powered reconnaissance drone that was launched from a parent aircraft. A ramjet uses the vehicle's forward motion to force air through the engine without resorting to turbines or vanes. Fuel is added and ignited, which heats and expands the air to provide thrust. A scramjet is a supersonic ramjet, and aside from differences with dealing with internal supersonic airflow, works like a conventional ramjet. This type of engine requires a very high initial speed in order to work. The NASA X-43, an experimental unmanned scramjet, set a world speed record in 2004 for a jet-powered aircraft with a speed of Mach 9.7, nearly 7,500 miles per hour. Design and manufacture. Most airplanes are constructed by companies with the objective of producing them in quantity for customers. The design and planning process, including safety tests, can last up to 4 years for small turboprops, so longer for larger planes. During this process, the objectives and design specifications of the aircraft are established. First, the construction company uses drawings and equations, simulations, wind tunnel tests and experience to predict the behavior of the aircraft. Computers are used by companies to draw, plan and do initial simulations of the aircraft. Small models and mock-ups of all or certain parts of the plane are then tested in wind tunnels to verify its aerodynamics. When the design has passed through these processes, the company constructs a limited number of prototypes for testing on the ground. Representatives from an aviation governing agency often make a first flight. The flight tests continue until the aircraft has fulfilled all the requirements. Then, the governing public agency of aviation of the country authorizes the company to begin production. In the United States, this agency is the Federal Aviation Administration, and in the European Union, European Aviation Safety Agency. In Canada, the public agency in charge and authorizing the mass production of aircraft is Transport Canada. In the case of international sales, a license from the public agency of aviation at transport of the country where the aircraft is to be used is also necessary. For example, airplanes made by the European company Airbus need to be certified by the FAA to be flown in the United States, and airplanes made by US-based Boeing need to be approved by the EASA to be flown in the European Union. Quieter planes are becoming more and more necessary due to the increase in air traffic, particularly over urban areas, as aircraft noise pollution is a major concern. Small planes can be designed and constructed by amateurs as home-builts. Other home-built aircraft can be assembled using pre-manufactured kits of parts that can be assembled into a basic plane and must then be completed by the builder. There are few companies that produce planes on a large scale. However, the production of a plane for one company is a process that actually involves dozens, or even hundreds, of other companies and plants that produce the parts that go into the plane. For example, one company can be responsible for the production of the landing gear, while another one is responsible for the radar. The production of such parts is not limited to the same city or country. In the case of large plane manufacturing companies, such parts can come from all over the world. The parts are sent to the main plant of the plane company, where the production line is located. In the case of large planes, production lines dedicated to the assembly of certain parts of the plane can exist, especially the wings and the fuselage. When complete, the plane is rigorously inspected to search for imperfections and defects. After approval by inspectors, the plane is put through a series of flight tests to assure that all systems are working correctly and that the plane handles properly. Upon passing these tests, the plane is ready to receive the final touch-ups, and is then ready for the customer.